There's a psalm Athryn Kuhlman never shared publicly, a psalm so powerful for protecting homes that she only whispered it to families facing intense spiritual attacks. And today, you'll uncover this psalm and why placing it behind your door could completely change your home's spiritual atmosphere. But before revealing this secret, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt your home wasn't a place of peace anymore? Like something invisible was disrupting your home's harmony? Athryn Kuhlman knew our homes are more than just four walls and a roof. They're spiritual territories, and like any territory, they can be invaded, attacked, or protected. It was September 1963. Athryn received a desperate call from a family in Akron, Ohio. Their home had become a living hell. Objects fell inexplicably. Strange noises echoed through the nights. The children couldn't sleep. Their marriage was crumbling. "Missionary Kuhlman," the woman said on the phone, "something is trying to destroy our family, and it seems to be using our own home against us." Athryn didn't hesitate. The next day, she was at the Miller family's doorstep. As she entered their home, and she felt it immediately, a heavy oppression, a thick atmosphere, sucking the very life from the environment. The children were pale, the parents exhausted, and there was a strange silence. It wasn't peace, it was fear. Athryn walked through the house in silent prayer, and then she stopped at the front door. She placed her hand on the wood and closed her eyes. "Here," she said. "The problem is here." The family was confused. The door looked normal. "You don't understand," Athryn explained. "The door isn't just an entrance for people. It's an entrance for spirits, and this door has never been consecrated." Athryn knew something few understood back then. Every home has points of spiritual entry, and the front door is the most important portal. It's where blessings enter, but it's also where curses enter. That night, she taught the Miller family something that would change their lives forever. "There's a psalm," she said, "that when handwritten and placed behind the door, transforms your home into a spiritual fortress. But it's not just any psalm, and it's not just any way of placing it." The psalm was Psalm 91, but not the entire Psalm 91 as most people know it. Athryn had discovered that there were 3 specific verses from this psalm that, when written in a particular way and positioned correctly, created a nearly impenetrable spiritual shield. "He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him I will trust. For He shall give His angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways." Verses 1, 2, and 11 of Psalm 91. But the secret wasn't just in the verses. It was in how to write them. Athryn instructed Mrs. Miller to copy the verses by hand, in her own handwriting, on a piece of white paper. It couldn't be typed. It couldn't be printed. It had to be handwritten. "When you write by hand," Athryn explained, "you're transferring your faith onto the paper. Each letter carries your intention. Each word carries your declaration of faith. Then she should fold the paper 3 times, always from right to left. Folding it 3 times represents the Trinity protecting your home," Athryn said. "Finally, the paper should be taped to the back of the main door, on the inside of the house, at heart level, so that every time you pass through the door, your heart is reminded that this home belongs to God." The Miller family followed the instructions exactly as Athryn directed. On the first night after placing the psalm behind the door, the children slept soundly for the first time in months. On the second night, the strange noises ceased completely. On the third night, a supernatural peace filled the entire house. But the greatest miracle happened on the 4th night. Mr. Miller woke up at 3 a.m. with a strange feeling. He got up and went to the living room window. Outside, he saw 3 men trying to force the lock on the front door, burglars. But something impossible happened. The men simply couldn't open the door. They tried for almost an hour. They used tools. They forced it with all their might. The door wouldn't budge. Frustrated, they gave up and left. The next day, the family discovered that 5 houses in the neighborhood had been robbed that same night. Only their house had been spared. Mr. Miller examined the door. There was no damage, no marks. It was as if an invisible force had prevented the burglars from entering. Athryn wasn't surprised when she received the call recounting what happened. "Psalm 91 doesn't just protect against spiritual attacks," she said. "It protects against all kinds of evil that try to enter your home. Because when you consecrate your door to God, you're declaring that nothing can enter there without the permission of the Most High. From that day on, Catherine began teaching this practice to selected families, always in private, always with the same warning. This isn't superstition, it's applied faith, but it must be done with reverence and a pure heart. The results were consistent and impressive. The Garcia family from Los Angeles was being tormented by constant nightmares. Every night, at least one family member would wake up screaming. After placing the psalm behind the door, the nightmares stopped completely. More than that, they all started having prophetic and encouraging dreams. The Lee family, owners of a restaurant, were facing a series of inexplicable accidents. Equipment broke for no reason. Employees were constantly getting hurt. Customers complained of discomfort in the atmosphere. After applying Catherine's method, not only did the accidents stop, but the restaurant's business tripled in 3 months. The Johnson family, who had moved into a house where a family tragedy had occurred years before, couldn't feel at home. There was a constant sadness in the air. The children cried for no reason. The couple argued over trifles. The psalm on the door not only dissipated the heavy atmosphere, but transformed the house into a place of joy and celebration. But Catherine discovered that the psalm's power went beyond protection. She realized that homes with Psalm 91 behind the door became points of attraction for blessings. Unexpected visits bringing good news, opportunities arising from casual conversations in the living room, family reconciliations happening during dinners. When you consecrate your door, Catherine Kuhlman explained, you're not just preventing evil from entering, you're inviting good to manifest. The Thompson family experienced this in an extraordinary way. They were facing severe financial hardship, on the brink of losing their home. After placing the psalm behind their door, they started receiving unexpected visitors, a distant cousin who offered the husband a better job, a neighbor who referred the wife to a work-from-home opportunity, a real estate agent who showed up offering to buy their house for way above market value, allowing them to pay off their debts and even buy a smaller house in a better location. These weren't coincidences, Mrs. Thompson told Catherine Kuhlman. They were divine providences that entered through our consecrated door. Catherine Kuhlman began to understand that there was something profoundly biblical and powerful in the act of consecrating the entrance of a home. In the Old Testament, God had commanded the Israelites to write His word on the doorposts of their homes. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them be as a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Deuteronomy 6:8-9. God always knew that the door is the strategic point of a house. It's where we declare our spiritual identity. It's where we establish who has authority over our home. But Catherine Kuhlman discovered something that not all Bible scholars understood. The door isn't just symbolic, it's literally a spiritual portal. In the spiritual world, she explained, there are territories, and every territory has entry and exit points. Your front door is the most important entry point of your personal territory. When you place Psalm 91 behind your door, you're doing much more than making a declaration of faith. You're establishing an angelic guard over your home, for He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. Catherine Kuhlman literally believed this verse. She believed that when you place these words at the entrance of your home, God assigns specific angels to guard that door, angels who do not allow the entry of anything that could harm the family. But she also discovered that not everyone was prepared to have a home under angelic protection. Some families who applied the method began to experience intense spiritual convictions. Sinful habits that once seemed normal began to deeply bother them. Entertainment that was once pleasurable became unpleasant. Conversations that once seemed harmless began to sound empty. When you invite God's holiness into your home, Catherine Kuhlman warned, you can no longer live as if He weren't there. The Madison family experienced this intensely. After placing the psalm on the door, they could no longer watch the television programs they used to watch. The music on the radio seemed to disturb the peace of the house. Empty conversations with neighbors became uncomfortable. At first, they thought about removing the psalm. They wanted to return to their previous normalcy. But then, something extraordinary happened. They discovered a new way of life, a deeper, more meaningful way, more connected with God. Their conversations became more intimate, their prayers more powerful, their family moments more precious. We didn't lose our freedom, Mr. Madison told Catherine Kuhlman. We discovered our true freedom. Athryn Kuhlman understood that Psalm 91 on the door not only protected against external attacks, it also purified the internal atmosphere of the home. But she discovered something even deeper about this practice. The psalm didn't just work for the family living in the house. It worked for every visitor who crossed that door. The Santos family experienced this in a striking way. They had a rebellious teenage son who had gotten involved with drugs. He would leave home furious and return even more aggressive. Arguments were constant. After placing the psalm behind the door, something changed. The young man continued to leave home rebellious, but when he returned, he was different. He would enter the house and immediately calm down. It was as if something invisible touched him the moment he crossed the threshold. In 2 weeks, he asked his parents for help to get rid of the drugs. In a month, he was attending church. In 3 months, he had become a completely transformed young man. The consecrated door didn't just change our house, Mrs. Santos said. It changed our son every time he entered. Athryn Kuhlman realized that there was a dimension of Psalm 91 that few understood. The psalm didn't just protect those who lived in the house. It ministered healing and liberation to everyone who passed through a consecrated door. But the most impressive case Athryn Kuhlman witnessed was that of a house she visited in Detroit. The Jackson family had lost 2 children in tragic accidents. The house had become a memorial of sadness. The mother could no longer smile. The father had become bitter. The surviving children lived in constant fear. Athryn Kuhlman suggested the psalm on the door practice, but with special guidance. You will write the psalm, she said, but before placing it behind the door, you will anoint the paper with oil and pray for each member of the family, including those who have already passed away. The family followed the instructions. In the first week, nothing changed. In the second week, the mother had a dream. She saw the 2 children who had died. They were at peace, smiling, and said, "Mom, stop carrying our pain and we are fine. Take care of those who are still alive." In the 3rd week, the father managed to talk about his children without crying for the first time in 2 years. In the 4th week, they made a decision that surprised everyone. They decided to transform the boys' room into a place of prayer and worship, a place where they would receive other families going through similar losses. 6 months later, the Jackson house had become a center of healing for bereaved families in Detroit. Sadness had been transformed into purpose. Pain had become ministry. Athryn Kuhlman understood that Psalm 91 on the door not only protected against the present evil, it also healed wounds from the past and opened possibilities for the future. But she knew there was much more to this practice than she had discovered so far. And what she discovered next completely changed her understanding of the power of God's Word, applied specifically and intentionally, because Psalm 91 on the door was only the beginning of a complete system of home consecration that Athryn Kuhlman had developed over the years, a system that transformed ordinary homes into true family sanctuaries. Are you ready to uncover the other elements of this system? Are you prepared to transform your home into sacred territory, a place that attracts blessings and repels curses? Because what I'm about to reveal could make your home one of the most blessed places in your city, but only if you're willing to approach this practice with the seriousness it deserves. What Athryn Kuhlman discovered changed everything she thought about home protection. She realized that Psalm 91 on the door was only the first layer of complete spiritual shielding. Our truly protected home needed 5 strategic points of consecration. The first you already know, the front door with Psalm 91. The second point was something few could imagine, the windows. Windows are the eyes of the house, Athryn explained, and through those eyes both light and darkness can enter. She discovered this during a visit to the Peterson family in Cleveland. They had placed the psalm on the door and experienced remarkable protection against external problems. But something was still disturbing the inner peace of their home. Athryn walked through the house in prayer and stopped before the living room window. She felt a specific oppression coming from that direction. "How long have you been having nightmares?" she asked. The family was surprised. They hadn't mentioned the nightmares. "Every night," Mrs. Peterson replied, "especially in the bedroom next to this window." Athryn looked out the window. Across the street was a cemetery. "Windows can become gateways for negative spiritual influences," she explained, "especially when they face places with intense spiritual activity." The solution was to write a specific prayer on a piece of paper and tape it to the upper right corner of each window, on the inside of the house. The prayer was simple but powerful. "Through the merits of the blood of Jesus Christ, I declare that only light, life, and blessings may enter through this window. All darkness remains outside. The Peterson family applied the prayer to every window in the house. On the first night, the nightmares ceased completely. More than that, the room that was previously unsettling became the most peaceful place in the house. The third point of consecration Catherine discovered was the most unexpected: the kitchen. The kitchen is the heart of the home, she said. It's where food is prepared, and food isn't just physical, it's spiritual. She learned this from the Martinez family, who faced constant conflict during mealtimes. No matter how hard they tried to have pleasant moments at the table, they always ended up arguing. Catherine sensed an atmosphere of contention specifically in the kitchen. The solution was to consecrate the place where the food was prepared. She instructed the family to write Psalm 23 in its entirety on a piece of paper and place it inside one of the kitchen cabinets, the cabinet where they kept their main dishes. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." When you consecrate the place where your food is prepared, you are declaring that your family will be nourished not only physically, but spiritually, that mealtimes will be moments of fellowship, not conflict. The Martinez family experienced an extraordinary transformation. Mealtimes became the most precious moments of the day. Conversations flowed naturally. The children began to share their dreams and concerns during dinner. The couple rediscovered the art of conversation. "Our table became an altar of gratitude," Mr. Martinez told Catherine. The fourth point of consecration was the most intimate place in the house, the master bedroom. Catherine discovered that many marriages faced problems not because of relational issues, but because of specific spiritual attacks against marital intimacy. The Roberts family sought Catherine out because, after 15 years of happy marriage, they began to experience inexplicable emotional coldness. They loved each other, but they could no longer connect intimately. Catherine sensed that the master bedroom had become a territory of spiritual division. The solution was to create an altar of commitment in the bedroom. She instructed the couple to write together, on a piece of paper, a declaration of marital covenant based on Ecclesiastes 4:12. "A threefold cord is not easily broken." The declaration read, "We as names declare that our marriage is a covenant of three, me, you, and God. In this room, we renew our commitment to love, honor, and protect each other. We declare that our intimacy is sacred and protected by the Lord." The paper should be placed under the mattress, on the side of the bed where they slept together. The result was immediate and profound. In the first week, they rediscovered intimate conversation. In the second week, the emotional connection was restored. In the first month, they were experiencing a marital renewal that surpassed even their honeymoon. "It wasn't just our marriage that was restored," Mrs. Roberts said. "It was our ability to be one flesh again." The fifth and final point of consecration was the most important: the family's prayer place. Catherine believed that every home needed a space dedicated exclusively to prayer. It didn't matter the size. It could be a corner of the room, a specific chair, or even a small makeshift altar. "When you set aside a specific space to meet God," she explained, "you are declaring that He has absolute priority in your home." The Wilson family transformed a corner of their living room into a small prayer altar, a small table, a Bible, a candle, and a family photo. Every day, at 7 in the morning and 7 at night, the family gathered there for 15 minutes of prayer. In 3 months, that corner had become the spiritual center of the house. The children began to go to the altar alone when they faced problems at school. The couple made their important decisions always after praying together in that place. But the most impressive thing was that neighbors began to comment on a different atmosphere in the Wilson home. "There's a peace in that house that doesn't exist anywhere else in the neighborhood," said a neighbor. Catherine realized that when a family applied the 5 points of consecration, the house became a true sanctuary. A place that was not only protected, but that radiated blessings to the neighborhood. She began to call this the sanctuary effect. The Lee family, owners of the restaurant that had been transformed after placing the psalm on the door, decided to apply the 5 points of consecration to their business as well. They consecrated the main entrance of the restaurant with Psalm 91, placed blessing prayers in the windows, consecrated the kitchen with Psalm 23, created a small prayer space in the office, and declared the main dining area a place of joy and fellowship. The results were extraordinary. The restaurant became known not just for its food, but for its atmosphere. Customers reported feeling at home. Couples proposed marriage there. Families celebrated reconciliations. Important business deals were struck over lunches. Our restaurant became a place of relational miracles, Mr. Lee told Kathryn Kuhlman. But Kathryn Kuhlman discovered that the 5-point system held even greater power when applied by an entire community. In 1968, she taught the method to 20 families in a Pittsburgh neighborhood plagued by high crime, robberies, vandalism, drug trafficking. The Christian families felt besieged. Kathryn Kuhlman proposed an experiment. All 20 families would apply the 5 points of consecration simultaneously for 30 consecutive days. In addition, they would meet once a week to pray specifically for the protection and transformation of their neighborhood. What happened was documented, even by local newspapers. In 2 months, crime in the neighborhood dropped by 70%. Drug dealers began avoiding the streets. Robbers moved to other territories. Even more impressive, non-Christian families started seeking out the Christian families, asking, "What did you do differently?" 12 non-Christian families converted to Christianity during that time. The neighborhood became known as the safest in the region. When you consecrate spiritual territory in agreement with other believers, Kathryn Kuhlman explained, you're not just protecting individual homes, you're establishing the kingdom of God in a geographical region. But Kathryn Kuhlman also discovered that the system had enemies in the spiritual world. Families applying the 5 points frequently reported intense spiritual attacks in the first 2 weeks, nightmares, falling objects, feelings of an evil presence, inexplicable family conflicts. When you establish sacred territory, Kathryn Kuhlman warned, you're declaring war on darkness. And darkness doesn't surrender territory without a fight. The Johnson family experienced this intensely. After applying the complete system, they faced 2 weeks of spiritual attacks that almost caused them to give up. But Kathryn Kuhlman encouraged them to persevere. The attacks are proof that you're bothering the darkness, she said. Persist. Victory is near. In the 3rd week, the attacks ceased abruptly, and what followed was such a profound family transformation that the family became a beacon of restoration in their church. Kathryn Kuhlman developed specific protection prayers for families facing attacks during the consecration process. Prayers that invoked the protection of the blood of Jesus and angelic intervention. But she always made sure to clarify, if you're not willing to face spiritual resistance, you're not ready for sacred territory. The practice of the 5 points of consecration spread discreetly through the network of people Kathryn Kuhlman ministered to. She never publicly taught it. Always privately, always to families who demonstrated spiritual seriousness. The results were consistent and documented. Restored families, saved marriages, transformed children, thriving businesses, pacified neighborhoods. But Kathryn Kuhlman knew that something deeper was happening beyond the protection and blessings. The families practicing home consecration were being prepared for something greater. They were becoming embassies of God's kingdom on earth. A consecrated home isn't just a protected home, she explained. It's a home that represents heaven on earth. It's a place where God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. Kathryn Kuhlman noticed that these families began experiencing prophetic revelations about their communities. They discerned spiritual problems in the neighborhood. They received specific directions on how to pray for local situations. They became strategic intercessors for their regions. The Davis family, after applying the complete system, began receiving specific revelations about problems at their local school. They prayed for months about a bullying situation that was destroying several children. At the end of the school year, the school principal sought out the family, asking if they wanted to become official counseling volunteers because there was something special about the way they related to the children. Kathryn Kuhlman understood that God was raising consecrated families as points of light amidst the darkness of the world. But she also received a revelation that deeply concerned her. In 1974, 2 years before her death, Kathryn Kuhlman had a vision during one of her morning prayer sessions. She saw the future of the church and Christian families. A time will come, she wrote in her diary, when Christian families will be systematically attacked. Marriage will be questioned. Parental authority will be challenged. Children will be influenced by forces that will try to turn them away from faith. The very notion of a Christian home will be considered outdated. But then she saw something that encouraged her. In this time, the families who know how to consecrate their homes will become strongholds of resistance. They will preserve the values of the kingdom for future generations. They will be the faithful remnant that will keep the flame burning. Athryn Kuhlman realized she had received not just a method of home protection, but a strategy of spiritual preservation for difficult times. In the last 2 years of her life, she dedicated herself to discreetly training Christian leaders in the 5 points of consecration. Pastors, missionaries, leaders of family groups, people who could multiply the knowledge without turning it into a fad. This isn't a technique, she always warned. It's a lifestyle. It's a declaration that your family has chosen to live under God's government. On February 20th, 1976, Athryn Kuhlman wrote her last diary entry about home consecration. Today, I completed 13 years teaching the 5 points of consecration. More than 500 families have applied the complete system. The results have exceeded all my expectations. But more important than individual miracles is the creation of a network of consecrated homes that will serve as embassies of the kingdom in the coming decades. My prayer is that this practice will be preserved and multiplied, that Christian families all over the world will discover the transformative power of living in sacred territory. Imagine ordinary homes transformed into sanctuaries. Imagine average families becoming embassies of heaven. That was Athryn Kuhlman's vision, a vision she shared with countless families. 3 days later, Athryn suffered the stroke that took her to the Lord. But her legacy, the 5 points of consecration, lived on through the families she trained. Decades later, families around the world still discreetly practice this complete system, families experiencing supernatural protection, abundant blessings, and a transformative influence on their communities. Perhaps it's time for your family to join this legacy. Perhaps it's time to transform your home into an embassy of God's kingdom. The 5 points are simple yet powerful. Psalm 91 by your front door, prayers of protection in your windows, Psalm 23 in your kitchen, a covenant declaration in the master bedroom, and a family prayer altar. 5 points that can transform your house from an ordinary place into a sacred sanctuary. But remember, this isn't a spiritual experiment. It's a lifelong commitment. A commitment to living under God's governance. A commitment to making your home a place where God's will is done, on earth as it is in heaven. Are you ready for this commitment? Are you willing to transform your home into a spiritual stronghold? Because when you consecrate your home to these 5 points, you're not just protecting your family. You're declaring that your home is territory of God's kingdom, and God's kingdom always triumphs over darkness.